Racism has affected our communities. It is increasing since the pandemic, but this is not something new. Canadians of Asian descent have had a 138-year struggle against anti-Chinese and anti-Asian racism. In the beginning, 1885 was the Chinese head tax that were imposed on the early Chinese that came to the country. And this meant that that community was treated differently. We were treated differently. In 1923, the Chinese Immigration Act, also known as the Chinese Exclusion Act, was passed by Parliament and signed into law. And that prohibited generations of people of Chinese descent from immigrating to Canada. And those that were here already were relegated to second, third, other class people in this country. It's always been there. But throughout the decades, I believe and I know that the Chinese community works hard. We culturally value education, we value the family, we value finding success, and that is what the Chinese community has done throughout the decades, is to prove itself by working hard. And we see through the histories of the Chinatowns across the country, the safe havens that were created where people could open their restaurant, start their laundromat, open their small business, and try to build a life. And the generations of Chinese Canadians have been able to find success. At the same time, racism has always been there. And we've seen in more recent years the racism becoming a more systemic, in some cases almost undetectable racism that is deeply ingrained within institutions. And now, over the past couple years, because of the pandemic, because of the narratives that are out there in the media, in the public discourse, that this is a Chinese virus, people of Asian descent have had to confront more violent forms of racism, whether it was the grandma that was punched in the face, or the individuals that were being spit on, the small business owners that had coffee thrown in their face. These are the types of violent incidents that we have seen increase. So the racism is going back to the more explicit forms. And we as a community need to stand up. As an elected representative, I saw the reports in the media. There were 2 national studies done that pointed to the data, which showed a dramatic increase in the number of racist, violent incidents against people of Asian descent. And it wasn't just affecting the Chinese community, it was affecting many different East Asian and South Asian and Southeast Asian communities, whether it is the Filipino, the Vietnamese, the South Asian diasporas. All of these different communities were experiencing this rising increase in anti-Asian hate. There are people in this country that experience hatred, that experience violence, and for something as simple as the perceived race or color of their skin. And that to me is something we all need to stand together and work together on. Education is, as Nelson Mandela said, the most important weapon you can use to change the world. And education is where it all starts. To me, education is a way for social mobility. It's a way out for communities, for children and youth who are living in poverty. Education is a way out of those circumstances. And for immigrant communities, education is incredibly important because it is, again, a way of social mobility. I have valued education in my life. It has played a tremendous role in my life, and I know how important it is. And I know how important it is for generations of Canadians, of young Canadians, because education is their way to achieve their goals. That being said, we need to have education on these issues. It's critical that young people, children in school, learn about their rights and responsibilities as Canadians. It's so important that they understand that there is a charter, there are human rights codes, there are laws that protect them against, for example, the rising incidents of hate against people of Asian descent. It's important that they stand in support of those rights and that they exercise those rights. They take action when something wrong is done. And if the system's not working, we all need to be vocal about that. I do believe education plays an important role, and so does the community speaking out. We often see incidents happen, and it's easy to become a bystander. It's easy to look at it and say, it didn't happen to me, and I'm gonna go on with my day. But that is exactly the problem, because hatred has no boundaries. We see hatred affecting different religious groups, we see hatred affecting different racialized groups, and soon enough, you see hatred affecting everybody. That is why when we see acts of violence against other groups, it is so important that we stand together with them. One of the greatest things that I experienced was during the pandemic, there was an anti-racism rally, anti-Asian racism rally that was held at Toronto City Hall. And I expected to go there and see different Asian community groups show up, but when I got there, I saw everybody. I saw people from the anti-Black systemic racism movement. I saw people from Indigenous communities. I saw a diversity of Canadians. And that was truly special because it really showed that when it comes to issues of equality, when it comes to standing up against hate, we have the support of all Canadians. And yes, I'm sure there is a vocal minority of people that put out hateful things, but they are a minority. I do believe that as Canadians, we stand together to send this message, and we ought to continue doing that. And we ought to take those individual decisions each and every day in our lives when we see acts of violence, that we take action, that we report it, that we stand together and speak out.